Well. Look who it is. Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Alex R. And today I have a large stack of books I want to talk about. And I want to talk about buying books in general and going to bookstores. I've got a cup of coffee that I picked up down the street, and I came back to talk about books with you. So, welcome. I hope you are doing well. So, I've got a lot of things I want to talk about on this channel, but first, I just had to tackle this pile because I do make book haul videos on here, and there's usually long periods of time that I don't buy books, but it was the holidays and that gap didn't happen. I went to Texas, I went home, and if you've ever been to Texas, you might have run into half-price books. I actually don't know if they have chains outside of Texas, but they certainly don't have them here in California. And so every time I travel, I buy a ton of books. Every time I go to anywhere, I visit any place, I like to look and see if there's a bookstore. And I go and I buy books, usually used. I will rarely buy a new book, that's just me. But it got me thinking about some videos I've seen recently on TikTok and other platforms where people are making a return to the library as a place, the library. And I think that's amazing because libraries are very important cultural places. They kind of preserve our heritage. They give people access to books across the spectrum, right? And usually, if you get a library card, it comes with other benefits. Probably the most immediate benefit being that you have access to an air-conditioned or heated building that's safe, where you can study and just focus on things, and you can check out books. But I find that very interesting because for some people this seems to alleviate some stress and pressure that they feel, maybe to spend their money on books. And some of these videos are in that, liberation style where it's like, I realize I don't have to fill my limited space, my tiny apartment with books, and I don't have to part with my money, which it seems like keeping a hold of your money is harder and harder as the years go by. So I understand for some people the thought of not having to buy books and just go, pick one up from the library is very liberating. But for me, the importance of the library and how nice that is as an option doesn't quite conflict with or contrast with buying books. I've never seen buying books and collecting books as a consumerist problem. I think that you can be addicted to anything nowadays, including shopping, and you can be, neurotic in your hobbies. That's one thing, but I've never seen buying books and keeping a lot of books as on the kind of same level where we're critiquing, fast fashion or consumerism, that type of thing. I think I've heard there's such a thing as like fast publishing. I don't know if that's true. But for the most part, that really comes down to how I see the function of bookstores as opposed to the library, and that both are highly complementary to each other, and that for some people, such as myself, a trip to the local bookstore is just as important as a trip to the library. The biggest way that this functions for me is that the library is a widely shared space. So, for example, I've got a few library cards. One of them is LA County, Los Angeles County. This place is giant. It's huge. And so the library, as big as it is, has to consider the multiple diverse populations when it decides what's going to be on the shelf and what's not going to be on the shelf. And I know when I've tried to find books around me that I want to read, I have an idea of what I want to read, it's been difficult to find things that are not bestsellers or widely renowned, by popular on the internet, popular with the New York Times, Oprah's book club, these kind of institutional metrics of success in the literary world, right? Like you can find the classics, that type of thing. And when I was younger, I grew up in a small town, and the library there was very small. And when I was younger, it did the job. It was a very safe place to go after school, but it didn't really have a lot. When I got to high school and I got a car, it gave me some mobility. And the nearest city to me is Austin, Texas, or it was Austin, Texas. And I found myself at a bookstore called Bookwoman. This is still there in Austin. It is a small, independently owned bookstore that is explicitly feminist and carries literature that relates to the queer community, including stalking local authors and stuff like that. And I went in there and I saw this book. on the shelf, and it was Cool for You by Eileen Miles. And it was my first time ever seeing somebody that looked like that on the cover of a book or the cover of anything really. And I picked it up and I read it, and it was highly influential. And so that's an example of how a local bookstore can cater, especially a small one, can cater to a very specific subpopulation, even in a big metropolitan area. And so many of the books in Bookwoman you are not going to find in the Austin Public Library system. And so it's very important to kind of supplement your experiences by going to locally owned, independent bookstores. That brings me, though, to half-price books. This is a chain of used bookstores, and it follows the model of buying used books, buying books from the population, and then selling them. So there's kind of this importing and then exporting. One half-price books might be really close to a university, and they're getting a bunch of kind of used textbooks, right? So each store is a little bit different in how big it is and what it offers. But it ends up being a kind of like a reflection mechanism of the population, this kind of cycle where they inform each other. So I really like half-price books. Every time I go to Texas, I stop in and I buy, way too many things, and I bring them home. So that's a bit of my kind of ramble about bookstores and owning books and buying them and having them. I think there is a level of access that buying a book gives you outside of the library. And I know personally it was such a liberating experience to actually go buy books. It's kind of the opposite. I think some people are liberated by going to the library and thinking, the kind of the game is off to buy this and buy that, what have you, especially if you just want the latest bestseller, you want to read it and you're not going to read it again, back to the library. But I find that actually buying books and going to used bookstores is itself liberating from the kind of cultural constraints of the library. So I've never felt guilty about buying books, owning books, giving them away if I don't want them anymore, that type of thing. I think they're meant to be held and touched and circulated, what have you. So that kind of brings me into the books, what I actually have gotten over the course of a few months. I have been on a bit of a fiction kick. I think it can be difficult to stick to one genre and one type of literature, especially after you read something that's very good and kind of influences you and sticks in your brain. Sometimes if I read a really good piece of nonfiction, I just won't want to read fiction, right? And vice versa. So let me have some of this coffee and I will show you what I have purchased on the book side of things. This is a cappuccino. And it is just really good. It's really great. Okay. Let's go. Books. I'm going to start with the most interesting book, just physically. It is this tiny little book. Okay. This is The Great Fire by Shirley Hazard. Have you heard of this book? I had never heard of it. But I saw the cover and it intrigued me. This is the Picador Modern Classics. I am very unfamiliar. I don't know if they're all this small, but it's quite satisfying to hold this thing. It's kind of heavy. It's nice, really nice printing on the inside, and just solid. I don't know anything about this book and I'm not going to look it up. I think it's a romance, but reading books blind has been a rewarding experience in the past, so I'm going to do it again with this one. A book that I don't have with me. I bought it and I actually read it on my trip. I read it on the plane, and then when I got to my mom's house, is Call Me By Your Name. I'm way late to that party, but it was fantastic. I'm surprised. I think when it came out, I was really snobbish, and I looked down on it for some reason. I think just because everyone else liked it, and I was being kind of ridiculous. It's a fantastic book. I recommend it. Okay. Second book. That's right. I got two books by Thomas Mann, who I have never read before, but I got The Holy Sinner and Dr. Faustus. Thomas Mann is one of those authors I got away with not reading either in high school or in college. But the backs of these, when I read them, they seem really interesting. And I really want to see what his writing style is like. I know some people in the past who have recommended him to me, so it's time to follow through on my commitments and actually give them a read. I'm really a paperback person. Really a paperback person. I like the size of these. Okay. What else do we have here? Oh, yes. Okay. Very excited about this. It's a little damaged. It's from Socrates to Sartre, the philosophic quest. I bought this because I was standing in the bookstore and I cracked it open, right? And it was such an easy read. It was almost like it was written for children, where everything is really laid out, question by question, philosopher by philosopher, just really easy to understand. And so I looked it up, like, is this for children or what is it? This was a TV show. This was actually a TV show from Socrates to Sartre. So it was written for the screen, and then it was made into a book. So that's why it's so easy to read, is that it was meant for the most general audience possible on television. And I thought, perfect. That's great for me. I like all that thick theory stuff, but sometimes you just I want to just feel that sense of adventure and inspiration when I read. And I love an author who's just, laying it out there and asking really interesting questions. This, of course, sets up the philosophy in a historical context. So you kind of know why these ideas came about. Usually some war or revolution or political upheaval. So, from Socrates to Sartre, I'm very, very excited about this. It's also small. I like it. Okay. Next book. Going in completely blind. Funeral in Berlin. It says, it's dark and dangerous. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't read the back. Okay, it just says, right? The classic and gripping spy novel of Cold War Berlin. That's all I need. I am sold. Perfect. It's a little penguin book. Great. So, I don't know anything about this book. I couldn't tell you. But I'm going to read it. And I think it's going to be good. I just have a good feeling about it. I also will read anything about Germany. When I was an undergrad, I studied German. I chose German as my language. And I actually just bought another German language book to kind of continue to learn. I don't know why. I don't have any German heritage at all. I am obsessed with Germany. I'm obsessed with it, and I love anything to do with the, before the wall fell. It's just, one of those things you can't explain. Why does anyone like anything? Okay, a book I'm very familiar with, but I have to own it because I've only read some of the short stories in here, and I want to read the rest, or the essays rather. A supposedly fun thing I'll never do again, by David Foster Wallace. Yeah. Also, look at this starfish cover. That's pretty fun, right? Do you like the starfish cover? A friend of mine sent me his essay about the cruise ship, and it was incredible to read. My family actually went on a cruise without me once on my birthday. They went on a cruise without me, and they brought me back a cake. That's all I wanted was an Oreo ice cream cake. So they go on a cruise without me on my birthday because they didn't want to pull me out of school. And then they brought me back from their fun time an ice cream cake. And I ate it, and I got food poisoning immediately. And I was sick for days. I told my friend that story, and they recommended me David Foster Wallace's essay on that cruise ship, and it made me feel better about being left out of my own birthday cruise. And I know that that's in here. And so when I saw this book, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to reread that and then see what else he's written. Yeah. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. I think that's the title of that essay. But yeah, I think so. Anyway, this book, I'm very excited about that one. Alright, moving on. You already know. Search the Wall. I had to read this in undergrad in a philosophy class. I forgot all of it. I really forgot all of it. So when I saw this, I decided to get it. There's not too much to say about this one. This one is what it is. I just want to revisit it because I forgot. I forgot everything about it. Okay. The Glass Bead Game. The Glass Bead Game. Speaking of German, Hermann, is it Hesse, was born in Germany in 1877, says on the back, and later became a citizen of Switzerland. Okay. This is also a book I don't know too much about, but I feel like it is going to be kind of scratch the itch that I have to read fiction that kind of has some how do I phrase this, kind of intellectualism embedded in the characters and in the plot, like like speaking of David Foster Wallace, like Infinite Jest, a lot of his characters are always really smart. I kind of like that. Like, I like reading books about people at university. Glass Bead Game. I really want to read that. Hello, everybody. You may have noticed that this is a new clip of a new day. And I guess a new me. Hi. So, I was editing the video and I realized that there's a strange buzzing sound. A strange buzzing sound that I don't know what it is. It kind